You're lying in bed, it's late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, and your mind won't stop. The mind begins to wander, imagining tomorrow. Every possibility, every conversation, every decision plays out in rapid succession. The right words, the wrong words, the reactions no one can predict. At first, it's just small, an imagined stumble here, a misstep there. Then the what-ifs pile up, one after another, until the day ahead feels heavier than it should. The mind loops through endless scenarios, spinning them into exhausting detail before anything has even happened. It's not just worry, it's a constant vigilance, a mind wired to anticipate, to prepare, to protect. But in the quiet of the night, it becomes relentless. Even a simple tomorrow feels tangled, crowded with imagined outcomes, doubts, and questions that never seem to stop. And yet, beneath it all, there is a strange persistence, a drive to understand, to foresee, to make sense of the chaos before it even arrives. People who overthink everything aren't just indecisive or neurotic. There's a specific psychology driving this constant mental churning, and it usually starts with a deep intolerance for uncertainty. Most people can sit with not knowing. They can make decisions without having all the information, accept that some questions don't have clear answers, move forward despite ambiguity. But overthinkers struggle with this. Their minds demand certainty, clarity, definitive answers. And when reality doesn't provide these things, when situations remain ambiguous or outcomes stay unknown, their thoughts spiral in an attempt to create the certainty that doesn't exist. This need for certainty often stems from anxiety. Your nervous system experiences uncertainty as threat. Not knowing feels dangerous, unstable, like standing on ground that might collapse at any moment. So your mind tries to protect you by thinking through every possibility, preparing for every potential outcome, analyzing every angle. If you can just think it through enough, your brain believes maybe you can predict what will happen, maybe you can control it, maybe you can protect yourself from being blindsided, hurt, or caught off guard. The overthinking feels productive because it creates the illusion of control in situations where you actually have very little. Many overthinkers grew up in environments where they had to be hypervigilant. Maybe your household was unpredictable, where moods shifted without warning, and you learned to analyze every subtle cue to anticipate what was coming next. Maybe expressing yourself freely had consequences. So you learn to rehearse everything before speaking, calculating how your words might be received. Maybe you experienced situations where you were blindsided or hurt, and your mind decided that if you just think harder, analyze better, prepare more thoroughly, you could prevent pain from happening again. Overthinking became a survival mechanism, a way to feel safe in a world that felt unsafe. There's also often perfectionism woven into the psychology of overthinking. You don't just want to make a good decision, you want to make the perfect decision. You don't just want to say something appropriate, you want to say exactly the right thing. And this perfectionism creates paralysis because perfect doesn't exist. Every option has potential downsides. Every choice involves some level of risk. Every statement could be misinterpreted. So you think and think and think, weighing pros and cons endlessly, trying to find the flawless path forward that will guarantee the outcome you want. But that path doesn't exist, and while you're searching for it, you remain stuck, unable to move, trapped in analysis. Overthinkers often have incredibly active minds, which can be both a gift and a burden. You notice things other people miss. You see patterns, make connections, understand complexities that others gloss over. Your ability to think deeply, to analyze from multiple angles, to consider nuances, these are genuine strengths. But the volume never turns off. Your mind doesn't know how to rest, how to stop processing, how to simply be without analyzing. Even in moments that should be relaxing, your thoughts intrude. You're watching a movie but thinking about work. You're in a conversation but mentally replaying something you said earlier. You're trying to sleep, but your brain is reviewing the day, planning tomorrow, worrying about next week. This constant mental activity is exhausting. Overthinking drains your energy in ways that physical activity never could. You can feel completely depleted without having done anything tangible because your mind has been running marathons all day. And this exhaustion shows up in different ways. Difficulty concentrating, trouble making even simple decisions, emotional overwhelm, physical tension. You might notice that by the end of the day, your brain feels fried. Not from accomplishing a lot, but from thinking about everything without actually resolving anything. Many overthinkers also struggle with something called rumination, which is different from productive problem solving. Problem solving has a goal and moves toward a solution. Rumination just circles endlessly around the same thoughts without progress. You replay scenarios that already happened, things you can't change, conversations you can't redo. You imagine future situations and rehearse them repeatedly, but instead of gaining clarity, you just create more anxiety. The thinking doesn't lead anywhere. It just feeds on itself, growing larger and more consuming the more attention you give it. There's often a fear of making mistakes driving the overthinking. If you've been criticized harshly for errors in the past, if you've experienced significant consequences from wrong decisions, if you grew up learning that mistakes were unacceptable, then your mind becomes hyper-vigilant about preventing them. Before you do anything, you think through every possible way it could go wrong. Before you speak, you consider every way your words might be misunderstood. Before you make a choice, you analyze every potential negative outcome. This feels like being careful, being responsible, being smart, but really, it's fear disguised as conscientiousness. Social situations are particularly difficult for many overthinkers. After interactions, you replay everything you said, analyzing whether you came across wrong, whether people liked you, whether you were too much or not enough. You interpret facial expressions, vocal tones, pauses in conversation, searching for hidden meanings or signs of disapproval. A slight change in someone's energy, and you spend hours wondering what you did wrong, constructing elaborate theories about how they perceive you. And this constant self-monitoring makes genuine connection difficult because you're never fully present. Part of you is always watching, analyzing, judging your own performance. What makes overthinking particularly painful is that it often prevents the very thing it's trying to achieve. You overthink to make better decisions, but the overthinking creates so much confusion that you can't decide at all. You analyze conversations to improve relationships, but the analysis creates distance because you're in your head instead of genuinely connecting. You prepare obsessively to reduce anxiety, but the preparation itself generates more anxiety than the actual event would have. The thinking that's supposed to protect you ends up imprisoning you. Many overthinkers also experience decision fatigue. When you overthink every choice, even minor ones become overwhelming. What to eat for lunch, which route to take home, whether to send a text message or wait. Your mind treats every decision as equally important, applying the same intense analysis to trivial matters as it does to significant ones. And this inability to differentiate between what actually matters and what doesn't leaves you perpetually exhausted, unable to make choices efficiently, stuck in mental quicksand where everything feels weighted with significance. There's also a relationship between overthinking and control. When you can't control external circumstances, your mind tries to control your internal experience through thinking. If you can't change what happened, maybe you can change how you understand it by analyzing it from every angle. If you can't predict what someone else will do, maybe you can prepare yourself for every possibility. If you can't make the future certain, Maybe you can at least feel like you've thought through all the options. But this attempt at control through thinking is an illusion. You're expending enormous mental energy without actually gaining any real control over outcomes. The tragedy is that overthinkers are often highly intelligent, deeply thoughtful people whose greatest strength has become their greatest struggle. Your ability to think complexly, to see multiple perspectives, to anticipate outcomes, these are valuable. But without the ability to also turn that thinking off, to trust yourself, to accept uncertainty, those strengths become liabilities. You become trapped in your own mind, unable to act because you're too busy thinking about acting, unable to enjoy the present because you're analyzing the past or worrying about the future. Breaking the pattern of overthinking isn't about forcing yourself to stop thinking. That just creates more mental struggle. It's about understanding what drives the thinking, addressing the underlying fears and needs, learning to tolerate uncertainty, building trust in yourself to handle whatever happens without needing to predict or control everything. It's about recognizing when thinking is actually useful and when it's just feeding anxiety. It's about practicing action despite imperfect information, making decisions even when you're not completely certain, allowing some things to remain unanalyzed and unresolved. Some of the most mentally peaceful people you'll meet aren't those who never overthink. They're people who learn to notice when overthinking starts and choose not to follow those thoughts down every rabbit hole. They've developed the ability to say, "I don't know," and be okay with it. They've learned that most of what they worried about never happened, that most of their mental rehearsals were unnecessary, that life unfolds whether or not they think it through completely. They've discovered that sometimes the best decision is made quickly with limited information, that some questions don't need answers, that not everything requires deep analysis. If you're someone who overthinks everything, the path forward involves building tolerance for discomfort, for uncertainty, for the possibility of being wrong or making mistakes. It means learning that your worth isn't determined by making perfect choices or saying exactly the right thing. It means recognizing that most situations are more forgiving than your anxious mind believes, that people aren't analyzing you nearly as much as you're analyzing yourself, that mistakes are part of being human rather than catastrophes to be avoided at all costs. It also means learning to ground yourself in your body rather than living entirely in your head. Overthinkers are often disconnected from physical sensations because they're so consumed by mental activity. But your body holds wisdom that your thinking mind can't access. Learning to feel, to breathe, to be present in your physical experience creates space between you and your thoughts. It reminds you that you are not your thoughts, that thinking is something you do rather than who you are. The goal isn't to stop thinking entirely, it's to develop a healthier relationship with thinking, to use your analytical abilities when they're genuinely helpful while also knowing when to set them aside. It's learning that sometimes good enough is actually good enough. That done is better than perfect. That uncertainty is part of life rather than a problem to be solved through thinking. Because the truth is, you could think about something for 10 minutes or 10 hours, and the outcome would probably be the same. But in one scenario, you've spent 10 minutes. In the other, you've lost 10 hours of your life to mental spinning that changed nothing except your own stress level. You deserve mental peace. You deserve to make decisions without agonizing over them. You deserve to be present in your life rather than constantly reviewing or rehearsing it in your mind. And that peace is possible, not by thinking your way to it, but by learning to think less, trust more, and accept that life will unfold whether or not you've analyzed every angle. Your mind is powerful, but it doesn't have to run constantly. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is simply let a thought pass without following it, let a question remain unanswered, let uncertainty exist without trying to resolve it. That's not giving up, that's freedom.